My name is Maren Holloway. I'm 34 years old. And on the afternoon of my wedding, my stepmother walked into the reception hall wearing my dead mother's gold locket. She smiled when she did it. She knew I would see it. She had spent 25 years waiting for an audience this big, and she finally had one. 212 people, an open bar, a photographer with a long lens, and around her neck a piece of jewelry that had been bought by my father in the spring of 1987, 4 months before I was conceived, from a small jeweler on Main Street in Ashford, Ohio called Linden and Sons. I know it was bought there. I know exactly when. I know exactly how much my father paid. I know it because I'm an estate appraiser, and I have spent 16 years of my life learning how to make objects tell the truth about themselves. And because of one other reason. A reason my stepmother did not know about, could not have known about. I had the original receipt, folded, yellowed, handwritten in the slanted cursive of a man named Hugo Linden, who in 1987 was 42 years old and who, that afternoon, was sitting at table 7 of my wedding reception as a guest of my husband's family. 81 years old now. Still sharp. Still in business. And he had no idea what was about to happen. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest. I did not plan what I did. I am not the kind of person who plans confrontations. I am the kind of person who writes things in notebooks and files them in folders and labels the folders by year. I documented my own pain the way I documented antique brooches, in case anyone ever needed proof. That afternoon, I needed proof. And what I did with that proof, quietly, without raising my voice, without crying, without making a scene in the way she expected me to make a scene, is something I have not told most of my own family. I am going to tell you. I'm Maren. This is hidden family revenge. If you have ever sat at a table where someone took something from you and dared you to say it out loud, stay with me. This story is for you. I was 9 years old when my mother died. Her name was Eleanor. Everyone called her Ellie. She was a third-grade teacher at the elementary school on Birch Street, which is the same school I went to, which means for a year and a half I had the strange privilege of seeing my own mother teach other people's children before she came home and made grilled cheese for me. She cut the crusts off. She always cut the crusts off, even after I told her, repeatedly, with great 9-year-old seriousness, that I was big enough to eat them now. She wore a small gold locket on a thin chain. Inside the locket was a single photograph, smaller than a fingernail, of my father holding me on the day I was born. My mother told me, more than once, that the locket was the most expensive thing my father had ever bought her, and she said it like a joke, but underneath the joke I could hear that she meant it. It was a 10th anniversary gift. Spring of 1987, Linden and Sons Jewelers, Main Street, 2 blocks from the river. I want to tell you something about my mother before I tell you what happened to her. She had a small cedar jewelry box with a brass key, and the box sat on her dresser, and every night before bed she opened it and put away whatever she had been wearing that day. She let me watch. Sometimes she let me turn the key. The wood smelled like old summer. The brass key was always slightly cool against my palm. I am telling you about this box because it matters later. I am telling you about the key because the key disappeared 3 months after Loretta moved in, and my father said, well, things go missing in a move, and I, at 10 years old, accepted that, because what else does a 10-year-old do? My mother died of ovarian cancer in the fall of 1999. It took 11 months from the diagnosis. At the end, she was in a hospice bed in our living room because she had asked to be home, and my father, to his credit, made that happen. 2 days before she died, she gave me a letter. She told me to put it somewhere safe and not to read it until I was older. I didn't read it until I was 18. I have it still. I have it in a fireproof safe in my home office. I am going to tell you what it said later, not now. My father remarried less than a year after my mother's funeral. Her name was Loretta Vance. She had 2 children from a previous marriage, a daughter named Piper, who was 3 years older than me, and a son who lived with his father in Tennessee. Loretta moved into our house in Ashford, Ohio in the summer of 2000. I was 10. I want to be fair. I want to tell you the truth and not just the easy version of it. There was a summer, 2 years after my mother died, when Loretta drove me 4 hours each way to a horse camp in Kentucky. I had asked my mother for that camp the year before she got sick, and somehow Loretta knew. She didn't make a speech about it, she just drove. Bought me a Coke at a gas station outside Cincinnati, said your mom would have wanted you to go, then drove home alone. For one summer, I thought maybe this could work. It did not work. I want to be honest about the pattern because the pattern matters. When I was 15 and started training under my Aunt Ruth as an apprentice in jewelry appraisal, Loretta told the room at Thanksgiving that I was, quote, finding myself in a little hobby. Aunt Ruth, who is my mother's older sister and who has run Callaway Estate Appraisal in Ashford for 36 years, smiled the way Aunt Ruth smiles when she is about to say something quietly devastating and said, "It's a profession, Loretta. Some of us just call our work by its right name." When I was 19 and away at college, Loretta hosted a Christmas dinner and seated me, by accident she said, at a folding card table in the hallway with the children. I was the only one there over the age of 11. My father told me later that Loretta had simply miscounted. When I was 26 and my grandmother, my mother's mother, passed away, Loretta showed up to the funeral in a black dress that I recognized immediately because the dress had been my mother's. And my father, when I asked, said, well, things end up in closets, and Loretta probably thought it was hers. That's 3. I could give you 30. I'm giving you 3. Each time I told myself I was overthinking it. Each time I documented it in a notebook I keep in my desk. The same way I document the provenance of an estate piece. Date, witnesses, exact words spoken. I have 16 notebooks. I started when I was 18. I just wanted, for one day, for one event, for one photograph, to be the daughter and not the audience. That day was supposed to be my wedding, Saturday, October 11th, 1:45 in the afternoon. I was in the bridal suite at the Ashford River Pavilion. The sun was coming in through the south windows in the particular way that October light comes in, low, gold, exact. I was wearing a dress I had chosen alone because my mother was not there to choose it with me and I had not wanted Loretta to choose it with me. And Aunt Ruth had offered to come, but I had told her no. This one I wanted to do by myself. The dress was ivory, long sleeves, a square neckline, nothing fancy. My mother would have liked it. My mother would have said it was a dress that looked like me. I was clipping a small pearl earring into my left ear when the door opened. Loretta walked in. She was wearing a navy dress, ankle length with a little embroidered collar. Her hair was set, her lipstick was a careful coral. She had put effort into looking like the version of herself that other people compliment. And around her neck, on a thin gold chain, was my mother's locket. I want to slow down here. I want to tell you what happened in my body before what happened in the room, because the body knew first. My hands stopped working. I mean that literally. I had been pinching the back of the earring between my thumb and forefinger, and my fingers simply forgot what they were doing. The earring fell. It hit the carpet. I did not bend down for it. The locket was on her collarbone. The chain was slightly tarnished in the way thin gold tarnishes if it has sat in a drawer for a long time. The locket itself caught the south light and threw it back at me in a small, exact circle. I knew that locket the way you know a face. I knew the weight of it. I knew the hinge on the side and the way the hinge had loosened over the years. I knew there was a tiny scratch on the back of the case, near the bottom edge, because when I was 9, just a few weeks before my mother got sick, I dropped it on the kitchen tile and I cried, and my mother picked it up and laughed and said, "Now it's ours, not just mine." I knew that scratch. Loretta saw me see it. I want you to understand, she saw me see it. There was a half second, no longer, when our eyes met and she did not look away and she did not adjust her collar to hide it. She let me see. Then she walked over to me, picked the earring up off the carpet, handed it back to me, and said, in a voice loud enough for the photographer in the hallway to hear, "You look beautiful, sweetheart. Your mother would be so proud." The photographer, a kind woman named Nell Ortiz, lifted her camera. The shutter clicked. I want to tell you what I almost did. I almost reached up and snapped the chain. Every part of me wanted to. I could feel the impulse in my forearm, in the small muscles in my wrist. I have spent years handling antique jewelry. I know exactly how much force it takes to break a thin gold chain. Less than you would think. I did not do it. I took the earring from her. I clipped it into my ear. I said, "Thank you, Loretta." And I turned back toward the mirror because if I had to look at her for one more second, I was not going to be able to choose what came out of my mouth. She left the room. Her heels clicked on the hardwood of the hallway. I heard her say something cheerful to someone outside the door. To my father, I think, because I heard him laugh. And then the sound of them walking away together. Aunt Ruth came in maybe 30 seconds later. She did not knock. She just opened the door, stepped inside, closed it behind her. She is 63 years old. She is the only person in my family who has ever looked at me the way my mother looked at me. She said, "Marin." She said, "Did she just?" I said, "Yes." She said nothing for a long moment. Then she walked over to the window and stood there with her back to me, looking out at the river, and I could see her hand on the windowsill, her thumb pressing down hard into the wood. She said without turning around, "Do you have the receipt?" I said, "It's in the safe deposit box at First National." She said, "And the letter?" I said, "Same place." She turned around. Her eyes were dry. Aunt Ruth has not cried in front of me since the day of my mother's funeral. She said, "What do you want to do?" That was the question. That was the entire question. Because Aunt Ruth knew, the way I knew, that I could do anything in this moment. I could leave the building. I could call the ceremony off. I could walk into the hallway and rip the locket off Loretta's neck in front of 40 wedding guests. I could say nothing forever and let the photograph that Nell Ortiz had just taken, me smiling weakly while my stepmother stood next to me wearing my mother's necklace, exist forever. I said, "I don't know yet." She said, "You have until the toasts to decide." She came across the room. She straightened the small chain on my own neck, a chain I was wearing that day, a thin silver one with no locket on it, because the locket had been promised to me when I was a child and I had assumed for 16 years that I would put it on for the first time on this exact day. She looked at me in the mirror. She said, "Your mother knew this day was coming. Marin, I want you to hear me, your mother knew." She left the room. The door closed quietly behind her. I sat at the vanity. Outside the window, the river was moving the way it always moves in Ashford in October. Slow, brown, patient. I could hear the pavilion staff setting up chairs in the hall. I could hear someone testing the microphone. 1, 2, 1, 2. The number you say into a microphone when you don't know what else to say. In the small mirror in front of me, I watched a woman in an ivory dress sit very still. She did not cry. She did not move. She was waiting for something. She did not yet know what. That was me. The ceremony started at 3 o'clock. I want to tell you about the ceremony, but I want to tell you about it the way I remember it, which is in fragments, because my mind was not in the ceremony. My mind was running provenance. That's what we call it in my industry, provenance. The documented history of an object. Where it was made, who owned it, when it changed hands, what proves the claim. When you're appraising a piece of estate jewelry, provenance is the difference between a piece worth $2,000 and a piece worth $20,000. A signature on a receipt, a photograph of the original owner wearing it, a handwritten card, a scratch on the case from a specific kitchen tile in 1998. I had all of it. I had the receipt from 1987, handwritten by Hugo Linden on a carbon copy form, with my father's signature at the bottom. $2,460, a significant sum for my father, who in 1987 was a regional manager at a paper plant making $41,000 a year. I had the photograph from my parents' 10th anniversary dinner, my mother wearing the locket, the chain catching the light of the restaurant. I had the scratch on the case, and I had my own memory, certified by no one but my own mind, of the moment that scratch was made. I had the letter. And, sitting at table 7 of my own wedding reception, with a small glass of red wine and a slightly bewildered expression, I had Hugo Linden himself. 81 years old. Still sharp. Still the proprietor of Linden & Sons, though his son Marcus did most of the day-to-day work now. He was at my wedding because his daughter had gone to high school with my husband's older sister, and the Briggs family had invited him as a courtesy. He probably did not yet remember the locket. It had been 38 years. He sold a lot of jewelry in 38 years. But I knew something about Hugo Linden that most people don't know. He keeps records. Paper records. Filed by year, by transaction number, in a metal cabinet in the back room of his shop. I know this because I have, in my professional capacity, walked back into that room twice, once to verify a piece for a client, once to help Marcus locate a 1976 invoice. Hugo never throws anything away. If I asked him about the locket in front of witnesses, he would tell the truth. Hugo always tells the truth. It is the only thing he has ever been famous for in Ashford. I am getting ahead of myself. The ceremony, 3 o'clock. I walked down the aisle on my father's arm. My father, Vernon Holloway, 68 years old, in a charcoal suit Loretta had picked out for him. He is a kind man. I want to say that and have you believe it. He is a genuinely kind man who, for 25 years, has made the wrong choice every single time it has mattered. He did not look at the locket. I watched him as we walked. His eyes were on the carpet, on the rows of guests, on the officiant, Reverend Clem Whitaker, who had baptized me, who had buried my mother, who I had asked 3 months earlier to perform this ceremony. He had said yes immediately. He had said, "Your mother would want me to." My father did not look at his second wife's neck, not once. Either he knew and could not look, or he did not know and had never noticed his first wife's locket existed. I do not know, to this day, which of those two things is true. I suspect both. Soren was waiting at the altar. Soren Briggs, the man I was about to marry. He was wearing a navy suit, slightly nervous, and when he saw me, he did a small thing he has done since the day I met him. He pressed his lips together, hard, the way you do when you are trying not to cry, and then he exhaled. I want to tell you something about Soren before I go any further. He is the steadiest person I have ever known. He is an architect. He designs hospitals. He spends his days thinking about how to make buildings that hold people through the worst days of their lives. He is, in some essential way, the opposite of my family. He builds shelters. They build performances. I had told him 2 weeks before the wedding that I was worried about Loretta. I had not told him exactly what I was worried about. I had said only, "She is going to try to make this about her." He had nodded. He had said, "Then we will make it about us." He did not know about the locket. He did not know about the receipt. He did not know about the letter. I had not wanted to put any of it on him. This is one of the things I am still working through in my own head about my own choices. I think now that I should have told him more. At the time, I thought I was protecting him. I was, I think, also protecting myself from having to say any of it out loud. I walked the rest of the aisle. My father handed me off. Reverend Clem opened his small, worn book. The ceremony began. "I want to be honest with you. I cannot tell you the words Reverend Clem said. I can tell you what Soren said when it was his turn to say his vows, because Soren said the thing he always says, that he found me late and he is going to spend the rest of his life arriving on time. I can tell you that I said my own vows, and that my voice held. What I cannot tell you is what I was thinking. Because what I was thinking was, she is in the front row, on the left, 3 seats from the aisle, and the locket is around her neck, and Hugo Linden is in the 7th row, on the right, and there is a carbon copy receipt in a safety deposit box 6 blocks from this room, and at some point in the next 4 hours I am going to have to decide whether I am the daughter who lets this go for the sake of a photograph, or the daughter who does not." The ceremony ended. We kissed. The guests stood. Music played. We walked back down the aisle as husband and wife. I want to skip forward because the cocktail hour does not matter for this story. I shook hands. I accepted congratulations. I drank 1 glass of champagne that I do not remember drinking. Aunt Ruth stayed close. She did not say anything to me about the locket. She did not have to. I could see her tracking Loretta around the room the way you track a weather pattern. At one point, around 4:30, I excused myself from a conversation with Soren's cousin and went into the small powder room off the back hallway. I locked the door. I put my hands on the sink. I looked at myself in the mirror. I had a decision to make. I had it within minutes. I want to walk you through the decision because this is the part I think about most. This is the part I want you to understand. Option 1, I do nothing. I let it be. I get through the reception. I let the photographs exist. I confront Loretta in private the next week, quietly, at her kitchen table, and she denies it or minimizes it or cries and says, "I never meant any harm, sweetheart," and my father stands behind her and says, "Well, you know, it was a misunderstanding, and the locket is returned, or perhaps not returned, and life continues. The pattern continues." I add it to a notebook. Option 2. I make a scene. I walk into the reception hall and I rip the locket off her neck and I tell 212 guests exactly what kind of woman my stepmother is. The locket is returned. The photographs are ruined. My father never speaks to me again. Soren's family thinks I am unstable. The story that travels through Ashford is not the story of what Loretta did. It is the story of what I did at my own wedding. Option 3. This is where I stopped. I want to tell you that option 3 came to me as a moment of clarity, but the truth is, it came to me as a memory. I was standing at the powder room sink and I remembered, suddenly and exactly, a sentence from my mother's letter. The letter I read for the first time at 18 and have read, I would estimate, 400 times since. The sentence was this: "You don't owe anyone your silence to keep their peace." I straightened up. I washed my hands. I dried them on the small embroidered towel that the venue had laid out. I unlocked the door. I walked back into the reception. There was something I needed to confirm before I did anything. I found my husband's mother, who knew everyone in the room, and I asked her casually where Mr. Linden was sitting. She pointed. Table 7, just where I thought. I walked over. Hugo Linden was 81 years old. He looked exactly like he had looked 20 years ago, which is to say, he looked like a man who has spent his entire life in a small jewelry shop wearing the same kind of suit. Brown, slightly worn, perfectly pressed. He had a small glass of red wine. He was talking to a woman I didn't know about a tomato variety. He looked up when I came over. He said, "Marin Holloway." My goodness. He stood up. He took my hand. He said, "Your father told me to come. I am so glad I did." I said, "Mr. Linden, I want to ask you a favor." He said, "Anything." I said, "Later tonight, if I bring you over and ask you a question in front of some people, will you answer it honestly? It is about a piece of jewelry." He looked at me. He looked at me for a long second. He has seen, in his 60 years of business, every kind of family. He has appraised inheritance jewelry for widows and for children of widows and for the second wives of widows. He knows the geography of grief. He said, "Of course I will." That was at 4:47 in the afternoon. I want to pause here. I want to tell you what I was feeling, because I think this is the part that surprises me even now. I was not angry. I want to say that and have you understand it. I was not angry yet. Anger would come later. Anger came in the weeks after, in the middle of meetings I couldn't focus on, in the shower one Tuesday morning when I dropped a bar of soap and cried for 40 minutes for no reason I could name. In that moment, at 4:47, standing next to table 7 with my hand on the back of Hugo Linden's chair, I felt something simpler: clarity. The kind that doesn't arrive with a sound. It arrives like a door that's been stuck for years finally clicking open. I knew what I was going to do. I want to tell you something that happened next that I did not plan, that I could not have planned, because the universe sometimes hands you a piece of evidence and dares you to use it. I was walking back toward Soren. I passed the dessert table. Loretta was standing there with her daughter Piper. Piper is 37 now, has 2 children, lives in Columbus, is a perfectly fine person who has never quite known what to do about her mother. Piper was admiring the locket. I heard her say it. She said, "Mom, that's so pretty. Is it new?" And Loretta, "And I want you to remember every word of this because I do." Loretta said, "Oh, this old thing? Your grandmother gave it to me before she passed. It's been in my family for years." Her grandmother, Loretta's mother, who died in 1993. Loretta lifted the locket between her thumb and forefinger and turned it gently in the chandelier light, as if showing off a treasured heirloom. I stopped walking. I stood about 6 feet away. She did not see me. Piper said something I didn't catch. Loretta laughed her bright laugh, the one she uses in public. And she said again, this time to a woman I didn't know who had drifted over, my mother's. "Yes, such a sweet piece. I wear it on the important days." A woman I did not know nodded politely, took a small piece of cake, drifted on. Loretta put the locket back against her collarbone, gently, the way a woman gently puts a thing back that she has won. I want to tell you what I felt at that moment. It was not anger. I am going to keep saying this because it matters. It was something quieter and a great deal worse. It was the feeling of watching someone confirm, with their own voice, that they had been lying not just for one day but for years. That the locket had been hers in her own mind for a long time. That she had constructed a story to protect herself from what she had done. I turned. I walked. I found Soren. He was at the bar with his best friend. He saw my face and immediately stood up straighter. He said, "Marin." I said, "I'm going to do something. In about 20 minutes. I need you to trust me." He said, "Okay." He didn't ask me what. He didn't ask me if I was sure. He said, "Okay." And he put his hand on the small of my back the way he has always put his hand on the small of my back, steady and dry and present, and he said, "Whatever you need." I want to tell you something. I want to tell you that in 25 years of being the daughter of Vernon Holloway and the stepdaughter of Loretta Vance. No one in that family had ever once said the words, "whatever you need," to me. Not on the day my mother died, not at my college graduation, not when I bought my first house, not ever. It took my husband saying it once for me to know, for absolute certain, that I was about to do the right thing. I want to ask you something. If you had the receipt, the proof, the witness, and the room, would you have asked the question in front of everyone or pulled her aside in private? Drop the word publicly or privately in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Because what I did next changed the next 10 years of my life. And there are still days I wonder if I made the right call. But that's the question, isn't it? That's the question I had to answer in the next 20 minutes. The toasts were about to start. Before I tell you what I did at the toasts, I have to tell you what happened earlier that afternoon. 2 hours earlier. Right after Aunt Ruth left the bridal suite and asked me what I wanted to do. I had said, "I don't know yet." But the truth is, part of me did know. The part of me that knew lived in the attic of my father's house, and I had to go get it. I want to walk you through this carefully, because this is the part where the story turned. This is the part where I stopped being the daughter who documented and started being the daughter who acted. After Aunt Ruth left, I sat at the vanity for maybe 4 minutes. I was supposed to be having my hair retouched. The hairstylist had already left. I was alone in the bridal suite. The ceremony was an hour and a half away. I stood up. I walked out the side door of the suite, the one that opens onto the small staff parking lot at the back of the pavilion. I got into my own car. I was in an ivory wedding dress in the driver's seat of a 2018 Subaru. I want you to hold that image because it is one of the strange ones I will carry forever. I drove the 6 blocks to my father's house, the house I grew up in, the house Loretta has lived in for 25 years. I knew nobody was home. My father had been at the pavilion since noon, helping with setup. Loretta had left her own house at 1:30 to come to the bridal suite to do exactly what she had done. I had a window, maybe 20 minutes, maybe less. I parked in the driveway. I let myself in with my own key. The house smelled like Loretta's house. Vanilla candles, fabric softener, the particular synthetic floral that she sprays on the curtains. I went up to the attic. The attic was where my mother's things had ended up. Not all of them. The good furniture had been kept, scattered through the house. The framed photographs had been quietly removed. The books had gone to a donation bin in 2001, but the things Loretta did not have a use for, the things that could not be repurposed or claimed or absorbed, those were in the attic, in a corner, under a tarp, where they had sat for 25 years. I knew where the cedar jewelry box was. I had checked, 3 years earlier, when I went up to find my mother's old journals for a project. The box had been pushed behind a wicker chair and a stack of National Geographics from the 90s. I had not opened it. I had not had a key. I went to the corner. I pulled aside the tarp. The cedar box was there, smaller than I remembered. The brass plate on the front had tarnished to a deep brown. I opened it. It was not locked. The brass key had been gone since 2000. But the box still closed and opened. I lifted the lid. Inside, there were 3 things. A pair of small pearl earrings that had been my grandmother's, a silver-plated locket on a broken chain that I did not recognize, and, folded in fourths, a yellowed piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was the receipt. I want to be precise here because I have spent my professional life being precise about pieces of paper. The receipt was a carbon copy form, light blue, from Linden & Sons Jewelers, dated April 22, 1987. Item description: 14-karat gold oval locket and chain. Engraved interior. Sale price $2,460. Signed at the bottom by Vernon Holloway. Stamped by Hugo Linden. I stared at it for a long time. The thing is, I have a copy of this receipt. I have had a copy of this receipt since I was 18. It is in my safety deposit box at First National. Aunt Ruth helped me track it down when I was 19 and asked her about the locket and where it had gone. But this was the original, the one my father had kept, the one my mother had kept after him, the one that had been in this cedar box in this attic for 25 years, with my mother's silent knowledge that one day someone was going to need it. I started crying. I want to tell you something honest. I do not cry easily. I had not cried in front of another person since I was 24. I cried, standing in my father's attic in an ivory wedding dress, holding a piece of paper from 1987 for about 90 seconds. Maybe 2 minutes. I do not remember exactly. I remember that my mascara held because the makeup artist had used the expensive kind, and I remember thinking that, and being grateful for that, and being briefly furious at myself for thinking about mascara at all. I put the receipt in the small ivory clutch I had been carrying. I closed the cedar box. I left the box where it was. I went downstairs. I want to tell you the second thing I did, because the second thing matters more than the first. I went into my father's office. He has a small office off the front hall with a roll-top desk that was his father's. I have known the contents of that desk since I was a child. I opened the second drawer on the right. The drawer where, when I was 11, I had once found my mother's old wedding ring after Loretta had announced, at dinner, that the ring had been lost in the move. The drawer was still there. The ring was still there, sitting in a small velvet pouch in the back corner, my mother's wedding ring, which my stepmother had told me 23 years ago was lost. I did not take the ring. I want you to know that. I did not take it. I closed the drawer. I left it where it was. Because the ring was a separate story for a separate day, and I had only one fight in me that afternoon, and I had already chosen which fight. I left the house. I drove back to the pavilion. I parked in the staff lot. I went in the back door. The whole excursion had taken 19 minutes. Nobody had noticed I was gone. I want to come back to the reception now. 5:03 in the afternoon. Toasts were in 15 minutes. The receipt was in my clutch. The clutch was on the head table. Hugo Linden was at table 7. Loretta was at the dessert table wearing the locket and telling a small lie to anyone who would listen. I want to tell you something I haven't told you yet. There was a moment, right before the toasts, when I almost did not do it. I want to be honest about this. I want to tell you what almost stopped me. I was standing near the head table talking to Aunt Ruth and to my husband and to Soren's mother, and I looked across the room and I saw my father. He was standing alone, near the windows. He was holding a glass of something. He was not drinking it. He was looking out at the river. He looked old. I want to say that and have you understand it. He looked old in a way I had not registered until that moment. 68 is not old. But that afternoon my father looked 75. He looked like a man whose suit no longer fit him quite right. He looked like a man who had spent a quarter of a century not looking at his second wife's neck and was tired from the not looking. And I thought, for a half-second, what am I about to do to him? I thought about the thing I had told myself for 16 years, that the receipt was for me, that the letter was for me, that the truth was something I held privately, for my own dignity, and that I would never spend it publicly because the cost would be too high. I thought about the cost. The cost was my father. My father would never look at me the same way again. He would never get over this. He would side with Loretta because for 25 years he had sided with Loretta about every single thing that mattered, and he was not going to stop on the afternoon of my wedding. The cost was a relationship that, if I was honest with myself, I had already mostly lost. I almost stopped. I want you to know that. I almost stopped because of my father. Aunt Ruth must have seen something in my face, because she leaned in, she put her hand on my wrist, she said, very quietly, "Marin." I looked at her. She said, "Your mother knew." I looked at her. I waited. She said, "Your mother knew this would happen. She told me. The week before she died, she said, 'Ruthie, that woman is going to take everything she can get her hands on, and Vernon is going to let her.' And Ruthie. Make sure Marin has the receipt." I had not known that. I had known about the letter. I had known my mother had given it to me. I had known, intellectually, that she had foreseen something. But I had not known that she had named it, said it out loud, to her sister. The week before she died. Make sure Marin has the receipt. I looked at my father across the room. I looked at him for a long time. I thought, he had a quarter of a century to choose. He chose her, every single time. He did not choose me. He did not choose the woman who used to leave him notes in his lunchbox. He did not choose the daughter who, at 13, sat at his desk crying because Loretta had thrown out a box of his first wife's letters and called it decluttering. He chose silence. He chose his own peace. He chose the smell of vanilla candles over the memory of my mother's perfume. He had used up his protection a long time ago. I straightened up. I unclenched my hand from the edge of the table. I looked at Aunt Ruth. I said, "Tell Reverend Clem I'm going to speak before the father-daughter toast." She said, "I'll tell him." She walked away. I want to come back to that night, briefly, before I tell you what happened at the toasts. Because there was one moment, the night before the wedding, that I have not told you about, and I want to tell you about it now. It was after midnight. I had been at my father's house. I was leaving. I had not intended to stay long. I had been picking up a small box of childhood photographs that my father wanted me to have. I had said goodnight. I was walking out the side door, through the laundry room, when I heard a sound from the kitchen that stopped me. It was Loretta crying. She was alone in the kitchen, sitting at the small breakfast table by the window. There was no audience, there was no performance. There was a glass of wine in front of her, half full, and her shoulders were shaking, and she was making the kind of sound a person makes when they have been holding something in for a long time. I stopped in the dark of the laundry room. I did not breathe. She said into the dark. To nobody, I tried. I really did try. Then she said something else I could not make out. Then she put her head down on her arm and cried for maybe another minute. Then she got up, rinsed her glass, went upstairs. I stood in the laundry room until I heard her bedroom door close. I want to tell you what I felt. I felt, for one short and terrible second, a softness toward her that I had not felt since I was 12. In the Kentucky horse camp summer, in the passenger seat of her car, drinking a Coke. I felt, briefly, that there had been a real person inside her once, and that the real person had been overwritten by some smaller and crueler version, and I had a flash of grief for the woman she could have been. I drove home that night. I drafted a text. Please don't wear anything of my mother's tomorrow. Please. I deleted it. I drafted it again. I deleted it again. I drafted it a third time and held my thumb over the send button for 9 seconds. I deleted it. I opened the letter, instead. I keep a copy of it on my phone. I read the line. The one she gave me. You don't owe anyone your silence to keep their peace. I went to bed, and in the morning, I went to my wedding, and my stepmother walked into my bridal suite wearing my mother's locket, and I understood, with absolute clarity, that Loretta had heard herself crying in that kitchen too, that she knew what kind of person she had become, and that she had decided anyway that morning to put the locket on and to walk into the room where I was getting married, and to let me see. She had chosen. The way my father had chosen for 25 years. I had been the only one in this family still acting in good faith. I was done. 5:15 in the afternoon. The bandleader took the microphone. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats. We're going to begin the toast shortly." I walked to the head table. Reverend Clem stood up. He cleared his throat. He said, "Before we begin the formal toasts, the bride has asked to say a few words. To her family." 212 faces turned toward me. I want to walk you through the next 4 minutes, because I have replayed them in my head 1,000 times. And every time I am surprised by how calm I was. I took the microphone. I did not stand on the small stage. I stood at the head table where I had been sitting, and I held the microphone close to my mouth because I did not want my voice to fill the room. I wanted it to reach the room, but quietly, the way you walk a horse, not the way you herd one. I said, "I want to thank everyone for being here today." Polite smiles, a small ripple of warmth. Soren put his hand on my back. I felt him there. I said, "I want to thank my husband. I want to thank my Aunt Ruth, who has been my mother's voice in my life for 25 years. Aunt Ruth, 3 seats away, lowered her eyes. She did not look up. I said, "I want to thank my father, who walked me down the aisle today, who I love." My father, at the far end of the head table, looked up. He looked at me. He smiled, the small, uncertain smile he has smiled at me since I was 19 years old. I said, "And I want to take a moment to honor my mother, who is not here, but who is, in a strange and specific way, here today after all." The room got quieter. I said, "There's a piece of jewelry in this room. A small gold locket. It was my mother's. My father bought it for her in the spring of 1987 for their 10th wedding anniversary from a jeweler on Main Street here in Ashford. My mother wore that locket every day for the last 12 years of her life. When she died, the locket disappeared. I was 9. I assumed, the way 9-year-olds assume, that adults knew where it had gone. I asked my father once when I was 11. He said, "Well, things go missing." The room was completely silent now. I am going to tell you something true. You can feel a room change. You can feel 212 people stop breathing in the same second. I felt it. I said, "I am an estate appraiser. Some of you know that. I have spent 16 years of my professional life documenting where pieces of jewelry come from, whose hands they have been in, what the paper trail proves." I reached into my clutch. I pulled out the receipt. I held it up. I said, I have the original receipt for the locket. It was in my mother's cedar jewelry box in my father's attic this afternoon. April 22nd, 1987. Linden and Sons Jewelers, $2,460. Signed by my father. Stamped by the jeweler. I lowered the receipt. I did not look at Loretta. I looked at the table where Hugo Linden was sitting. He had set down his wine glass. He was watching me carefully. I said, Mr. Linden, I'm sorry to do this to you at someone else's celebration, but I want to ask you a question in front of the people here. Would you mind? Hugo Linden stood up. He was 81 years old. He stood up slowly. He put his napkin on his chair. He said in a voice that was steadier than mine, Of course, Marin. Go ahead. I said, Mr. Linden. In the spring of 1987, you sold a 14-karat gold oval locket and chain to my father, Vernon Holloway. Engraved interior, $2,460. Do you remember the piece? He said. I remember the piece. I said, who did he buy it for? Hugo Linden looked at me. He looked at my father. He looked, briefly, in the direction of Loretta. He looked back at me. He said, he bought it for Ellie, for your mother. He told me, at the counter, that it was for their 10th anniversary. He said, Hugo, I want her to have something that doesn't fall apart. He picked the locket because he said Ellie liked things she could keep. The room did not move. I said, thank you, Mr. Linden. He nodded. He sat down, slowly. The way an 81-year-old man sits down. He picked his napkin back up off the chair. I turned, then, for the first time, to look at Loretta. She was sitting at table 3. Her hand had gone to her throat, not to the locket, to her own throat. She was very pale. The locket was still there, against her collarbone, catching the light from the chandelier. She said, Marin? She said it in her bright voice. But the bright voice cracked in the middle. For the first time in 25 years, I heard Loretta Vance say a word with an I at the end of it and not a we. I did not answer her. I did not need to. I said into the microphone to the whole room, I want to be very clear. I am not going to do anything tonight. I am not going to ask for the locket back. I am not going to ask anyone here to take a side. I just wanted, on the day I become someone's wife, on the day I leave my father's house in the way that daughters leave their father's houses, I wanted my mother to be in the room. And the only way I knew how to put her in the room was to tell the truth about a piece of gold. I lowered the microphone. I said, thank you all for coming. Please, enjoy the toasts. I handed the microphone to Reverend Clem. The room was silent for what could not have been longer than 4 seconds. It felt like 4 minutes. Then someone at the back started clapping, slowly, one pair of hands, then another, then a third, then most of the room. Not a roar. A steady, quiet, deliberate applause. I want to tell you something. Aunt Ruth did not clap. She just looked at me. She had tears running down her face for the first time since 1999. She did not wipe them away. My father did not clap. He sat at the head table. He looked at his hands. He was crying too, not performing it, just crying. Loretta stood up from table 3. She did not say anything. She did not look at anyone. She walked, slowly, between the tables, toward the back of the room. The locket was still around her neck. The chain caught the light one more time as she passed under the chandelier. She went into the back hallway. The door closed behind her. I did not see her again that night. I sat down. Soren took my hand under the table. He squeezed it. He did not say anything. He understood that there was nothing to say. Aunt Ruth leaned over. She whispered into my ear, Your mother would have done the same thing. I want to tell you about the rest of the night, briefly, because something happened that I did not expect. About 40 minutes later, when most of the guests had moved out onto the small terrace for the cake, I felt someone come up next to me. It was my father. He stood there. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, I'm sorry, Marin. I said, I know, Dad. He said, I should have. I said, I know. He said, I didn't know about the locket. Tonight, I want you to know that. I didn't know she had it. I want you to believe me. I looked at him. I said, I believe you, Dad. I think that's part of what makes it sad. He nodded. He cried, very quietly, with his back to the room. He said, What do you need me to do? I said, Get the locket back. By Tuesday, bring it to me. He said, I will. He did. On Tuesday morning, at 10 o'clock, he came to my office and put the locket on my desk and did not say a word. The chain was slightly tarnished. The little scratch on the case was still there. I took my mother's locket out of his hand and I put it around my own neck for the first time. and I have worn it almost every day since. The enabler, and I want to call him that even though it pains me to call him that, because he was also my father, sent me an email the next week. 3 lines. He wrote, "I have been a coward. I love you. I am sorry." I read it 5 times. It did not fix anything. It mattered anyway. It has been 8 months. I want to tell you where things are now, specifically, because I have noticed in the videos I have watched that endings are often vague. Things got better. Things worked out. I do not want to do that to you. You stayed with me. You deserve the specifics. Loretta and my father are still married. They are also, for the first time in 25 years, in counseling. My father initiated it. Loretta agreed because, after the wedding, the story moved through Ashford the way stories move through small towns. In the produce aisle, at the church coffee hour, in the lobby of Linden and Sons Jewelers where Hugo's son Marcus has, more than once, been politely asked about the locket. Loretta stopped going to the Wednesday quilting group at her church. She stopped having coffee at the small bakery on Main Street. The community did not banish her. It did something quieter. It noticed her. I have not spoken to Loretta directly. We have been in the same room exactly twice. Once at my father's birthday in February, once at a funeral in March. Both times she nodded at me, both times I nodded back. Neither of us spoke. I do not know if we ever will. My father comes to my house every other Sunday. He helps Soren with the small things in the garden that Soren, who is brilliant at designing hospitals, has no idea how to do in a backyard. They have started watching baseball together. I find this strange and beautiful and slightly painful. My father is trying to become the version of himself he should have been a long time ago. I am not sure he will get all the way there. But he is trying. He is trying out loud, where everyone can see. Aunt Ruth has slowed down at her firm. She has started training me to take over Callaway Estate appraisal when she retires in 3 years. She told me, 2 weeks ago, that this was always the plan. That my mother and she had talked about it the year before my mother got sick. That my mother had said, "Ruthie, that girl is going to know more about objects than anyone in this town one day, and she is going to need a place to put it." I had not known that either. I am 35 next month. Soren and I are expecting a daughter in the spring. We are going to name her Ellie. She will not know my mother, but she will know the locket, and she will know the receipt. And she will know, the way I want her to know, that the women in this family keep records, and that we keep them not because we expect to need them, but because sometimes we do. I want to tell you about one more thing before I end this. The cedar jewelry box. The one in the attic of my father's house. He brought it to me 2 months after the wedding. He did not say anything when he handed it over. He just set it on my kitchen table and sat down in the chair across from me. The box was empty. He had emptied it. The pearl earrings, the broken silver locket, the small mementos. He had given them to me weeks earlier, separately, as if returning items one at a time was easier than returning them all at once. The brass key was taped to the inside lid. He had found it. He did not say where. I keep the cedar box on the sideboard in my dining room now. Brass key in the lock. The box is empty except for one thing: the original receipt. From April 22, 1987. Folded in fourths, right where my mother left it. Tonight, at dinner, Soren and I will sit at our table. 4 place settings. For Aunt Ruth and her partner, who come every Wednesday, not 5. There is no place at our table for the people who did not choose us. The cedar box will be on the sideboard. The brass key will catch the light from the window. The locket will be around my own neck. The way it should have been, 16 years ago on the day I turned 18, when my mother had wanted me to have it. I want to leave you with something. Because I know some of you are sitting in your kitchens or your cars or your beds listening to this, and I know that some of you are sitting with a story that looks something like mine. Different jewelry, different stepmother, different father, same shape. I used to think that keeping the peace was the same as being a good daughter, that if I documented things in notebooks and kept receipts in safety deposit boxes and never said the thing out loud, I was protecting something. A family, a father, a photograph. I thought silence was a gift I was giving them. It wasn't. It was the gift they were taking from me, year after year the same gift, and the gift was my voice. Restraint, it turned out, was not the absence of power. It was power that knew exactly when to speak. You don't owe anyone your silence to keep their peace. My mother wrote that 26 years ago in a letter for a daughter she would not live to see grow up. I am going to write something similar one day soon for a daughter of my own. I hope she never has to use it. I am going to give it to her anyway. I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want your answer. If you had been me, if you had the receipt and the witness and the room, would you have done it publicly the way I did, at the head table in front of 212 people? Or would you have pulled her aside into the back hallway and done it privately where no one else would have heard? I still wonder. There are days I think I made the right call. There are days I'm not so sure. Tell me, below. I will read every comment. I'm Marin. Thank you for staying with me. If you have a stepmother story or a father story, or a story about an object that traveled through your family on a current of small lies, this comment section is yours. The locket is around my neck. The brass key is in the lock. The box is on the sideboard. My mother is, in some quiet and exact way, finally home. I'll see you in the next one.